Welcome to the Small Church Podcast, where faith, community, and ministry intersect in the unique context of smaller congregations. I'm your host, Tony Marr, and I'm thrilled to be joined by two men who are convinced they're a little bit more talented than I am.
That is right. I'm Robert Kill, one of those supposedly more talented guys, co-host and fellow small church leader. Together, we're here to explore the challenges, triumphs, and inspiring stories within the tight-knit communities that make up our smaller churches.
And I'm Bruce Montgomery, the one here to bring even more to the table than these two and offer a unique perspective to our conversation.
So whether you believe this talent hierarchy or not, you're in for a treat. If you're a pastor, a church member, or just curious about the world of leadership, you're in the right place.
Each episode, we dive into topics that matter to you, from innovative ministry ideas to navigating the unique dynamics of a smaller congregation.
So grab your cup of coffee, settle in, and let's journey together through the wonderful tapestry of small church life.
This is the Small Church Podcast.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are we doing today?
Good, how you?
I'm doing okay. I want to welcome all of our listeners to the Small Church Podcast. We are glad that you are here with us today. So I've got a confession to make as we get started with today's episode. So I've had a challenging week. It's been a challenging week professionally. It's been a challenging week personally. It's been a challenging week relationally. It's been a challenging week. And after we finished recording last week, we sat and we had about another hour and a half discussion that at one point, Robert, you said, I wish that we had been recording this. And we were just talking about ministry and about ministry life and about the personal dynamics that come with being involved in ministry. And I tended to skew a little bit, well, if we're being honest, I tended to skew a lot a bit towards the cynical and negative there as we were talking about some things. And Robert, you kept coming through with the positive and the uplifting, and man, I love life, I love ministry, and I just kept being like, man, ministry sucks. I think at one point I said I would love ministry if it wasn't for the people. And when we were done with that episode, and I'm doing the editing and listening back to our last episode, and then processing and thinking through, reflecting on some of our discussions afterwards, a long, good discussion. And then kind of checking my own self and my own heart, I was thinking, man, I'm the get off my lawn guy. I am just an old cantankerous man, and I have a 4 as the first digit in my age. I'm way too young to be that guy right now, and was really kind of convicted about my attitude, about my outlook, and began to think of some of the things that I was dealing with personally, and thinking, how is this bleeding over into my mindset just on life in general? And so I sat down and thinking about this week's episode and said, there are times in our life where we have to intentionally look for the joy. And I said we should do an episode on that, because there are a lot of times in ministry where it can feel overwhelming. There are a lot of times in ministry when some of our listeners might feel like me, that you might feel like that old get off my lawn guy. And when you have kids just simply out playing and enjoying sunshine and life, and you're like, I just mowed that grass, get off my lawn. And so it's in those moments where sometimes joy comes easy, that we're just floating, it just feels like we're soaring with the Spirit, and everything is grand, and the sun is shining bright, and we can feel the warmth on our face. And then there's other times where we have to really search in the midst of the shadows for the sunlight. And so I am giving an apology to you guys for my attitude at the end of our recording.
Who didn't even know you had said this stuff. Like, it was only the three of us that knew it. So, well,
right.
and
no,
the
I'm
Holy
apologizing
Spirit.
to you. I'm apologizing to you and to Bruce.
I thought you were apologizing to the people listening.
No, they didn't hear any of that. But I'm apologizing to you guys for my attitude last week. And we're spending some time this week addressing that. If you're sitting in a place like me, or you've been in a place where it's just, man, life is heavy, and how do we find joy in the midst of life and in the world around us?
Yeah, it's funny you were talking about mowing the yard and get off my grass because I just cut it. I was thinking about that first episode of Ted Lasso, and when Ted and Beard walk onto the grass, and they're just this. You've watched Ted Lasso?
I've not seen
really?
Ted Lasso. I can't afford Apple TV.
That's the
I just
only
paid
reason.
$2,100 for my truck that's back in the shop 3 days later. I can't afford Apple TV.
In fairness, Ted Lasso's been off for like a year, so you've had plenty of time before your truck was broken. But I'm joking. But there's this moment where Ted and Beard, when they first get to England, they walk on the field. And they're just having this real serene moment because they're on a professional football pitch, and it's this whole conversation and metaphor and all these great things. And then Nate, the kit guy who cleans the uniforms and puts the boots and scrubs the boots clean, comes running across the field and like, get off the lawn, get off the lawn. And like, because you can't be on the grass. And they realize who he is. And he's just like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. We've got more. We just cut it. Do you want to go get some out of the trash? And he's like, no, we're good. And he's like, okay, you still got to get off the grass. And that's really how our lives go sometimes, is it's like, man, get off my lawn. Oh, you're actually just having fun. Doesn't matter. Get off my lawn anyway. And so when you sent this out, it's so funny. Like I was looking at something on social media, and I hadn't thought about the Ted Lasso thing, but I really I knew why we were talking about this, but I really hadn't thought about what you and Bruce and all of us had said as deeply as you had. But I'm terrible with saying names, and so if your last name's not like Smith or Jones, I do a terrible job and I'll butcher it. But Henry Nouwen, is that how you say that?
Henri Nouwen.
There we go. See, that's why I talk to smarter people than me. He says joy doesn't simply happen to us. We have to choose joy and keep choosing it every day. And I think that's the hard thing about this whole concept is like, I want to yell, get off my lawn. I want to say, get off this, like I'm tired. I'm hurting. I just fixed this. You guys keep breaking it. But yeah, it's that hard choice. And I don't know that I was quite as, totally positive is just thanks for making me look better than I am, but that whole thought is really, really hard, and joy, happiness, kind of working those two words, what sits inside of the Bible, what doesn't. Those are just some things that I've really been trying to work through recently.
Yeah, and I told you guys in our pre-show meeting that in my work with Higher Ministries, I have the opportunity, the privilege to walk through life with numerous different men who are ministry leaders. And it was several years ago that I had a day of back to back. It started at like 6 a.m., ended at 5, and it was just meeting after meeting after meeting at the local Starbucks with guys, and each one was just dealing with heavy, heavy issues in their personal life, in their ministry life, in their church life. Every conversation was deep and heavy, and me talking guys off of the ledge and trying to be a positive voice in their life. At the end of my final meeting, my coffee buzz had kind of worn off a little bit. I get into my car, and I have my 15-minute drive home, and I made it about 2 or 3 minutes outside of the Starbucks parking lot, and I just broke down, just driving home, just lost it. And I can remember praying, God, it's broken. Your church is broken, and I'm not sure if it can be repaired. I think that it may be broken beyond repair. And I don't know why you've chosen me to sit in this chair with so many men who are experiencing that brokenness of your body. But you've got to help me figure out some way to bring them some semblance of hope in the midst of this. And it just is hard sometimes. And so our episode today, we want to really focus on how do you find joy when everything around you seems to be crumbling, or how do you maintain joy when everything seems to be going right?
Yeah, and just like as we, this is definitely a caveat, and we can talk about this later and things. I literally was having this conversation this morning, and I'm about the church and where it's at, and I just think that when the church became the hope, when the building became the hope for people, and I just went blank on a name, and I'm really frustrated about that. He's Dallas Willard. Wrote the book, The Great Omission, and which I have not read, and honestly did not even really know existed until about 2 weeks ago. Dallas isn't a guy that's really been on my radar. I hear his name mentioned occasionally as a quote, and I'm going, okay, but it's nothing that really moved the needle for me. But, God called us to go and make disciples. And I think if we're going and make disciples, not just Christians, and if we're making church attenders and we're making these people who just show up to church, then we're missing the point. And I do think church is important. Tony Evans says that you do not have to go to church to be a Christian. You also don't have to go home to be married, but stay away long enough and your marriage will eventually suffer. And I think that the thing is when the church is in the right space, that it is a space to encourage and equip the saints for the work of the ministry to send out to make disciples. It's a very, very, very different thought process. And when the weight of the world sits upon men and women who stand with a microphone and lead worship, teach the Bible, and when you're doing those things and you feel this weight that, like, if I don't do this perfect, people, like, if I can say this well enough, if I can do this well enough, then it will shape and it'll change how people think. And I heard a guy saying the other day, when you start talking about spiritual formation and discipleship, we are technically unlearning. We're not learning how to be disciples. We are unlearning how to not be disciples because we already have such a base that we are sitting in. And so I just think that that's like, why do we sit in this, room, in this circle and have these conversations? It's because of this, because we have lived that hurt. And you're not going to be able to go in on Sunday and change all of this, but it has to start. And, in my life, and we'll get to this in a little bit, but, my life hit some of that this past weekend. It comes to a place in a moment in time where if you're not, like, finding joy inside of life and in the rhythm of where you are, and you're not following in the steps of Jesus, when those hard things hit, or when that frustration comes, or that deacon or elder team light you up, or that set of parents like just yell at you because their teenager doesn't love Jesus enough, or this one parent's mad because their kid cries in the nursery every day, but then you find out their kid cries at home all day as well, but you're the problem on Sundays, so they can't enjoy church because their kid won't stop crying. If you're not sitting and resting in the joy that is what Christ tells us to do, it just leaves such a hard, beat up place. And it is easy to be cynical in that moment, and easy to be bitter. And so.
Little side note here from what you just said. If you have not read Divine Conspiracy by Dallas Willard, you need to get on Amazon right now and order that book.
I've not read anything by Dallas. I don't even know that I own a Dallas Willard book.
That's your starting point.
I
right
probably
there,
own
Divine
5,000 books, and I don't own one by Dallas Willard that I'm aware of.
That's your starting point. Right
so,
there.
yeah.
Divine Conspiracy. Yep. Hey, Bruce, we haven't heard from you yet this morning. What do you have to say to us this morning? Welcome to the Small Church Podcast, Bruce. Thanks for joining in.
Well, I'm glad to be here, but I don't know what I have to contribute. I've been looking this week as I looked at the questions you had for us, and trying to figure out some things. And I came up with a couple of books that I've read. One of them was in seminary. You're talking about finding joy. When we graduated from seminary, Ronald Osborne, I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was the one who gave the I guess the message for graduation time, and in a very liberal seminary, he told all of us to take our diplomas and not put them on a wall, but put them on the altar. And I thought that was really touching to me, to not get so arrogant that we've got all these degrees, but they're meant to be used for service, not to be placards on the wall or to do other things. And I was thinking about that, and one of them is a book called In Christ's Place. Ronald Osborne did that, and there's still, I looked this morning, there are still a few copies of the book somewhere, but no, that's what the church is, isn't it? Aren't we, as the church, in Christ's place? We are filling the gap as a body of Christ, and that's a high calling. And I found myself more joyous in ministry in all the years I've done it, and I've done it over 50 years. The time I had the greatest joy was the time I had the most pressure. and the joy came because I didn't rely on Bruce. I relied on God, and I would go in a sanctuary and sit down and imagine where people sat and just be there. Or I was overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do, didn't know what I was doing. I just began to react and act and search, and found joy in that. I found joy in learning, found joy in working with people, even though sometimes we didn't always agree. But if I was going to be in a situation now, if I was in a church full time, I would pick a church that was deeply in trouble, and probably see what God's going to do with it.
Well, I would
Because
say you're a rare breed.
If I can handle it myself, who needs God?
True, very true.
And that for preachers, if you can handle the problem yourself, you're not letting God do what He wants to do. And so therefore, I just feel like that stress makes me feel more like I'm in the presence of God and feeling the Holy Spirit than if I'm getting a chance and fixing it myself. And
yeah, Bruce, and that's something
time,
that I used to say a lot, that you and I have talked about several times before, and it's something that I say to guys that I work with a lot of times, is that if you're not in a place where you're forced to your knees daily because you feel like you're in over your head, and there's no way you're getting through this without the Holy Spirit coming in and just taking complete control, if that's not where you're at, then you need to figure out how to get there, because that's where you find, like you said, that's where you found your joy. And I think that for many people, if you're just coasting through, you're just going through the motions and ministry is easy, then I would, as we get to later on in this episode, some practical things that you can do to find joy in ministry, that may be at the top of the list, is get in over your head. Get in something where you have to be on your knees daily saying, okay, God, I took a leap. I took a big step here and maybe got myself in above able to tread water. And I need you to step in and take over. I'll be along for the ride. And I'll do whatever you ask along for the ride, but I need you to take the wheel here.
Yeah, and I think, Bruce, you said something that's really crazy powerful there. And the thing that I have found is, and I don't know, did we talk about foot washing last week in our episode, or was that a pre or post thing? I mean, it's just like that whole, well, we talked about it in it because we talked about the he gets this commercial. Yeah. And so this whole idea, though, of the humility to do things, and sometimes it's really easy. Like there's some things happening in the life of my church right now that, I am praying for specific people and doing things, and I can sit at my desk and literally just be in tears praying and asking God to work, to intervene, to do, to fix, to heal, to bring this wholeness to that. And you mentioned like going in to the auditorium and, standing behind a chair where somebody, because regardless whether we're Baptist or not, we joke about that, but people kind of float to the same seat every week. And as communicators, that's nice because the friendly faces to talk to, and the ones that are asleep 3 minutes into your sermon. And so, I mean, the same person falls asleep every week in my sermon. And I know not to look at them because I'm going to be like, it is. But I mean, we talk about it on the way home. She gets to hear it either way. So but like we go in and we stand and we sit in these chairs and we get on our face before God. And there's this place of things like actually kneeling down and doing can feel so awkward when we're in certain spaces. But if you're the only person in the room, why are we embarrassed? Why are we nervous to get before God, to humble ourselves and to really take to heart the things that are happening in the lives of the people? And I think sometimes just because, and I think bitterness. I just think we're grumpy. We don't make enough money. We don't have enough time off. We don't get enough vacation. Our kids are bad. I mean, and that's the church's fault. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's just so much stuff. But yeah, I think this pride, bitterness, self-centered attitude of I'm here to grow a church. No, you're here to disciple people, to lead people to grow closer to Jesus. And that does not mean numerically. I don't know that I ever want to pastor a church over 150 people. And I want to see us grow, and then I want to send out 50 people and let's go start something new in another part of the town, a part of our community, and let's reach and grow and do and grow in that space. I just love the small intimacy and when I get to do and kind of serve in that. And Bruce, I thought that was beautiful, kind of what you said, just about, because I mean, that's something that you lead well in. And that's the things I always walk out when you have time when we allow you to talk. When I shut up long enough, it's like you have so much like deep, thoughtful contemplation inside of things that my busy life doesn't always step into.
Yeah, I do want to make another quick side note. This is my second sidebar of the first 20 minutes because the Small Church podcast, if nothing else, we are about journalistic integrity. I did, after last week's episode, reach out to the people at He Gets Us to see if we could get, I got no response. So just thought I'd throw that out as a little sidebar. Maintain our journalistic integrity right there, that we did try to go straight to the source on He Gets Us, and have not, as of yet, have not received a response. I'm sure that it's coming. I'm sure that they're going to get back and we'll have
you're in the
creator.
queue.
I'm sure
You're 30. Yeah. You're 30 calls away from getting your text answer.
300 maybe. So guys, let's talk a little bit about that. It's been well chronicled on the Small Church podcast that ministry is difficult. So there are challenges that we face in ministry. But can you guys give some specific examples of how it's important to acknowledge the challenges that you have faced? And oftentimes I think that we try to either avoid or blow past the challenges, and the importance of acknowledging the challenges.
They don't go away. If you don't do something, the challenge is going to get worse and worse. There were times in a church that I served that I would get information about people, what they're doing somewhere in the church, and I can go up and confront somebody, but I don't really like to do that. Nobody does, but I've had to go to people's homes and do the whole thing. You got a problem with somebody, tell them. And I would sit down in the person's home and ask what's going on, tell them the problem that I'm having. One person was leaving the church, and Tony, you've heard that story before, because we were doing more modern music, and that wasn't even before. That was before the music wars were there. And he would leave and make a big deal of leaving. And I would go. I finally went out in the parking lot and met him and talked to him. And
Bruce took it to the parking lot.
Bruce took it outside, literally.
Yeah. And I said, "Is what you're doing, Christian? You're using the ways of the world to do things. You're boycotting things and making it be known. You're showing people you're unhappy. That's not a Christian way to deal with things. Let's talk about it. What don't you like? I know it's not. I know you don't like the music, but it's not going to change." And we need you to be a better example. And we talked, and then so we got through that one. And then the next time I had a thing with him was over Super Bowl Sunday. For early on in Super Bowl, we were going to cancel some things because Sunday night church is really about 1/4 of what you have if you're lucky. And so we had called it to not have church, but have people go to people's homes and do things. And again, I got the same kind of rumbling and things. And the same person, I went over and talked to them, and I said, and we finally decided we'd have a short service, and then people would go home and have people in their homes and meet with them and do things. And just whenever he disagreed with something, he and I had to come face to face. And I do not like that, whether it's with a student when I was teaching or whether it was in the church when I was preaching. But I won't. If I shy away from it, it's still there, and it's worse. So to address it, to pray about it and address it, was the only way I felt to deal with it.
Yeah,
until I did.
I didn't know fighting in the parking lot was an option.
Yeah.
See, Bruce brings so much to this podcast.
If I'd have known that, I might still be in full-time vocational church
I would have
ministry.
handled a lot of situations differently. There's some dudes that were way bigger than me, and I still handled them the same way. But like, I would have handled this a lot differently.
One of my favorite quotes comes from this brilliant PhD in organizational communication. His name is Dr. K. Bruce Montgomery. And it's a quote that he has used, and I've probably quoted it 200 times over the course of life. And he says, whenever two or more are gathered together, conflict will arise. And I just love that quote because it's true that in ministry, you're going to have conflict. In ministry, you're going to have challenges. Ministry without challenges is like sailing without waves. You know, the true journey happens when you get beyond the breakers and you get out into the waves. It's in navigating those waves where you truly begin to sail and become a sailman. I'm not sure what the technical term is for I guess become a sailor, right?
Sailor.
A sailor, not a sailman, a sailor. I love it. There was a quote I read by Steve Jobs that he said, your work is going to fill a large portion of your life. And the only way to be truly satisfied in life is to do work that you truly believe in. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. And so you have to find, so many times I think that we say that we're going to segment ourselves, that we have our work life and we have our personal life. And that can be true if you're a postal carrier. That can be true if you work on an assembly line. In ministry, that's simply not the case. You're 24/7. You live it. It's part of your DNA. It's who you are. And so if you're constantly down about your ministry work, if you're constantly down by the challenges that you're facing, that's going to bleed over into every other aspect of your life. And you're just going to become a person that's not very welcome to be around.
Yeah. It just hits such a hard space because the reality comes down to is, and we talked around a few of these things, Jesus told us in this world you will have trouble, but take heart because I've overcome the world. And, I said last week and people want to buzz in about this. We got to get to some definitions of some things, which honestly, I'm not really going to do here, but, I don't know that happiness is a biblical term. And when we want to be happy, it's like, claiming what Jeremiah was saying to the Israelites as a promise it's designed for us that, have plans for you, plans to prosper, plans. I'm just going like, okay, it's great. It's a great quote. And it's really nice on a mug.
Bumper sticker.
Yeah. But, trying to claim that, but when you have to look at the context, and the New Testament is just filled, and Jesus even kind of lives his life saying, this is going to be hard, guys. This is not going to be easy. And if the enemy is real, and I know that like there are people listening to this right now that are very like always about the enemy. Like they live their life like the enemy, the enemy, the enemy. And there are people, and you all are probably a lot more like me, that you grew up in a space where the enemy is an uncomfortable conversation. Like Satan is mentioned in passing, like it's more heaven and hell. And if you can accept Christ and attend church, like nothing else matters. You've got your fire escape. You're out of hell. So why does the devil matter? Like, why do we worry about these things?
Yeah,
And
sometimes
so-
we really over spiritualize things.
Yeah.
You have the person who doesn't show up for church on Sunday, and you call them to check on them, and like, oh, I was on my way to church. I needed to be there. Had a rough week. I was on my way. I needed to be there, and then my car ran out of gas on the way there. Satan's just really attacking me right now, and I needed to be there. And oh, really? Did you have gas in your car? No, I didn't. I was on E. Satan's not attacking you. You're an idiot.
Yeah.
Stop and put gas in your car.
Yeah. And that's right. And so and then in both of those extremes, when you go to the spiritual side, there's the application side of that. And there's people who want to blame Satan for everything when it comes to this. And then there are real moments where the enemy is doing everything it can to thwart. There's a good like $9 word, to thwart the things of God and to in your
How do you
heart.
spell that?
Isn't it THWART? Is that right?
Thwart.
Thwart. Bruce, you're smart.
You're the PhD, Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce.
I thought the pronunciation was thwart things, try to stop things. Or
Look, I'm a
block
redneck
things.
from the South. I make everything like I change the syllables and the emphasis on everything. So it's just I am really the only real true like Southerner here, and
really
and
are.
it shows with everything I say and do.
Yeah.
So
Boy, does it.
the concept is right.
That makes you so that's what makes you so valuable.
The concept is right, but I might have the pronunciation might be wrong, just like Henry a minute ago. So I think that like that is the thing, is that we have to look at that, and we talked about this, and I don't like in our faith church family right now, our faith family at church, there's just a lot of crazy things that are going on. There is some unbelievable stuff that's happening, and there are some really hard things. There's families on the verge of divorce that just breaks my heart, and I just want to reach in and fix and do. And there are people that haven't been to church in 10 years that we have been praying for 10 years that are showing up and starting to sit inside. And we, again, and you go, Robert, you just said church. I get it. Like, they haven't walked through a church. What you don't know is they've been reading through the New Testament with my wife for the last 3 weeks and haven't walked through a church door. So, they choose a Sunday to come to try and figure some things out. They're trying to navigate through some stuff, and they want to sit beside people who are navigating faith. So I'm not saying church is the fix, but and then there's just so many insane things that are happening. And in that space, God has gifted me the ability to sit and to lead and to navigate in this moment, in this season for the church that I'm at. And we have just hit some hard stuff. Tony, you and Bruce, I sat with you guys 3 weeks ago, and my wife and I have 3 boys, and everybody's fine. Nobody's jumping off cliffs. Everything's okay. Nobody's failing out of school. Like life is okay, but we just had some hard stuff come up. And we just had some things happen that really put us into a place that we were broken, that we were just devastated. And I had, and I don't, Tony, it might have been you or Bruce. I didn't talk to a ton of people, and so it really might have been you all. If Satan can attack anywhere, what's the thing you care about the most? And for most of us, it's our family. And honestly, if you're listening to this and you have a family and it's not, I think Jesus and family, you may have to reprioritize some things in your life if that's not the order. But my wife and I were just broken. And we spent time, we cried, we prayed, we did so much stuff. Well, fast forward a few weeks and we sit in this beautiful Sunday. I've got a week off. I'm just sitting on the side, worshiping, enjoying the day, doing the welcome. And one of my friends shows up who's really been navigating faith that I just mentioned. And we're sitting there and I get a text from my outer perimeter family. And I don't want to get deep in, just in case some of you all know or something like that. It's really, I'm not being mean. It's none of your business. And so if you do know my family, don't make a deal out of this. But there's just some tension in my family, and it's some really, really heavy tension. And I get a text message from my family, that, in the middle of church, knowing I'm in church, and I get this text and my heart just breaks. And so in that really, really high, now I'm at probably as low as I can be. I go home and I spend a couple hours in the afternoon. I head back to church for this worship event. We have these once a year, and it just happened to be on this night. And it kicked it off, and it was great. We have 3 campuses. Our bands are ridiculous. I'd put them up against any band in the planet, and they are so good. And the first band gets up there and is playing, and it was fine. Then the second thing kind of starts, and God just starts working. And then Melissa starts getting text messages from our friend who's kind of navigating some faith stuff. And it was just really encouraging, and God's just working and moving in this thing, and then just stuff starts to happen, and then some people come up to me after it's over, and they're wanting to start these spiritual formation discipleship classes, and they're wanting to sit together, which we need to do, to kind of develop a better discipleship culture in what we're doing. And I'm ramping back up, and then I'm heading home, and things start to fall again, and I get home and I'm talking to my family, the 5 of us. And I'm literally in tears, which, if you knew me, is not uncommon, but I don't cry a ton like that with my family. And what I'm about to say, and I said this to Tony and Bruce right before, I understand the special situation I'm in. If you get up and go to Lowe's, or you go to work at the funeral home or the office or the factory or the plant, and you do that every day, all day, and then you go home and write a sermon, you go home and care for your family, you go home and coach Little League, man, I'm so much more enamored with you than I am with myself. So understand what I'm about to say. It took some sacrifice, but it really didn't take as much sacrifice, but the meaning and what happened was necessary. And so it's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm literally in tears talking to my family. And I just texted my boss, and I just said, hey, I need a half day of prayer. And when they want us to do that once a month anyway, I'm not the world's best at doing that, just being transparent. And I went in our backyard, and we've got a fire pit, and I just went out at like 8 a.m. and started a fire and sat in the yard and drank coffee and walked in circles and turned on some worship music. And I'm not trying to sound overly spiritual. I didn't ask God for anything. I literally said as I started, you know the good and you know the bad. You know the hurt that I'm in, and the like real highs and successes that I'm facing. So I can't tell you anything you don't know. I need you to fix this. And that was all I said. And I literally walked in circles. I'm not very good at building a fire, so it took me quite a while to get that going. But it's not my strength. I'm not much of an outdoorsy guy. But I did get a fire going, and I got that happening there. And I just, for like 3.5 hours, I sat and stared at a fire, had my Bible with me, and I opened up and I prayed through a psalm, and I read a couple chapters, and I was just quoting things and quoting scripture. As something would pop into my head, I would quote that verse. And as something would go, and I was just praying through some stuff. And the thing for me is God did kind of tell me something in 3.5 hours, and it wasn't anything miraculous. But the reality just comes down to that, like, stuff stinks and life is hard sometimes. And you are not immune to that. And what I believe is that if Satan can keep me distracted from the good that's happening, from the things that God is trying to do, that is a win. And I don't know what people are sitting in. And for me, we can quote, I think you've even got this in here. We can talk about James and 1 Peter and Paul in prison and all these other things. And we will, I'm sure. But I just think there's these moments where we have to understand that when we aren't feeling joy, we've got to find a way to get away. And I know you can feel like the worst thing you can do is if the only day you have to sleep in is a Saturday, and for you to neglect or to get up early, or you're going to feel like neglect your family for a part of a Saturday morning. But if once a quarter you need to get out, I promise you need to get out. If once a quarter even, you set aside half a Saturday and you get up early and you go take a hike, you go sit by the lake with a fishing pole, you go, I tend to not be able to focus on things when I'm doing stuff like golf and that kind of thing. I need something that's a little more quiet and serene. And so just, sound of a plug hitting the water, or I don't love hiking, but if you do, that's your jam. I can sit by a fire pretty easily and just sit and let God speak and heal and restore. I think those are the moments that, that's where the fact of, for me, because last week I said I don't sense much greater joy than where I am right now. Where I find my joy is just in this discipleship process of loving people and loving God, loving people, and journeying along this path. And there's so much joy in that. Anyway,
yeah, I think Robert, you're in a unique situation where you're seeing, and this really is what prompted this episode, is that you're seeing the work of God in a lot of the things that you're doing. You're able to be a part of that. I think we have a lot of our listeners who are sitting there right now that are thinking, man, my church is either incredibly plateaued or declining or on the verge of death. That we're not seeing that. I'm not seeing those things. I'm not having those conversations with people. My conversations are all around what I'm doing wrong, what we're doing wrong as a church, what should we be doing different, what should we be doing better, or they're just not any conversations happening at all. I sit alone all day and just with my own thoughts and my own failures or perceived failures, personal perceived failures. And so if you're one of our listeners who's sitting there in that position and you're listening to Robert talk about the joy that he finds in ministry through the discipleship process and walking through this with people, and you're sitting there thinking, man, what I wouldn't give for that. I want to spend some time now for those people.
Yeah.
And maybe for people who are in a situation like yours, but it's just not consistent. What are some practical things that we can give our listeners and honestly probably give ourselves on how we can find joy in the midst of challenges and just really the midst of life?
Go for it, Bruce.
I would find someone I could trust, not your wife. You can do that, but getting outside the family, somebody that you can trust, and within the church, and share life with them and share your concerns, and be honest with each other. And I probably wouldn't choose another preacher, because when preachers get together, there's a competition. Yeah, we had more than you had Sunday, and we did this, or we're doing this, and you're not doing this. Somebody who listens and somebody who cares about you, and just share life with them and share those concerns. I would not be so eager to put in programs.
Yeah,
that I don't think is always the answer. But how do you address or work with certain people in communication? And I gave Tony a book a long time ago, Difficult Conversations. You remember Tony?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you kept it a long time. Yeah. But it's there are times in your life when things are really difficult. And if you don't address them, they're not going to change. And so the difficult conversation is one that it's a marriage is breaking up, or you're about to lose your job, or the church is going to fire you, or those kind of things. That's a difficult conversation. And how do you find somebody to talk to about that, and then let God work within that? I don't think that it's time to panic every time anything happens, but you can't go along and not address things in your life. But you need somebody you trust.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be someone, like you said, who will speak positive into your life. Someone that even when that they know you so intimately that they can tell from the moment you sit down that you're in a bad spot, and how can I speak peace? How can I speak joy into your life? Yeah, I think that's a huge one, Bruce.
See, and I would have, and it's funny because I would have said the exact same thing Bruce said. Being in a really, really small church I shouldn't say really, really small. I understand over 100 people's pretty large in the scheme of the country. But in a church this small where everybody knows everybody and things are there, I think you've got to be careful. I think there's a lot of wisdom in what Bruce said. But I actually have a couple of pastors that I can sit with that we never talk about how big our churches are. We never talk about, we talk about what we're teaching. We talk around what God's showing us as we're reading the Bible, as we're doing those things. We talk about our families. We talk about how do you Sabbath well. How do you rest well? How do you sit inside of Scripture? How do you take a quiet time and not just and I use that terminology so we all understand it, but like how do you study scriptures without, like, I'm air quoting, study scriptures for preaching? How do you do these things inside of this space? And I've got a couple of pastors, one's in his 80s and another one's about my age, that I'm able to sit with and ask these things. And there is no, like, well, when I was in a church, when I did what I do, it's just, man, here's what God's showing me. And so I love what Bruce said, and I think you got to be careful. But for me in a small church, I don't really want somebody that's in my space being that intimate, close person. Although our former worship pastor sat heavy in that space for me, and I would still go to Gary if I needed something, and I try and talk to him, but we're in different spaces now. But I think that's important.
Yeah, and there may be some of you that are sitting there saying, I would love to have someone like that in my life, and I don't know who that is. I don't know who that would be. Maybe you're a rural guy who's out in the middle of nowhere, and your church is struggling, and you're just saying, everyone I know is connected to my church in some way. And so I don't know who that person is. I want to give you some practical things.
Phone numbers of pastors you know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, we'll have in the episode notes, in the show notes, we'll have a call list that you can make.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness,
Judd Wilhite's number.
Part of what. Yeah, good luck with that. I've got him on. I'm number 3,000 in line for him to get back to us to be a guest on our show as well. But. That's what one of the things that Higher Ministries is here for, that we would love to help with that. We would love to be that person to sit down with you and be able to walk through life and ministry with you. But I think there are some things that you can do that I want to spend some time focusing on, that are things that you can do right now, that you can implement right now without having to pick up a phone and connect with someone else. One of those is something that someone taught me years and years ago that I wish I practiced more. It would probably help with some of my cynicism if I practiced it more. And I honestly try to practice this. It's just not an everyday thing. And that's maintaining an attitude of gratitude. And I didn't mean for that to be a bumper sticker right there. I really didn't mean for that to be a coffee mug statement right there. But take a moment each day. If you journal, in your prayer life, in your prayer life, to really sit and identify things each day that you're thankful for, that you can be genuinely appreciative, focus on those positive aspects. I think doing that every single day, having something that you can just say, thankful for this, I'm gracious for this thing in my life, helps to push back a little bit on the disappointment that comes in life when you can really stop and focus daily on the things that you're gracious for. I think another big thing, and we've talked about this many times before on this show, is to celebrate those small wins. And sometimes you have to almost make it up. I've been watching, I coach high school basketball, and so I've been listening a lot to talks by Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, and how do I motivate my guys to want to work harder? How do I motivate my players? And Michael Jordan used to make up things to motivate him. It's pretty well known, if you've watched the Last Dance documentary, that he would just fabricate things in his own mind, manipulate himself in his mind to find motivation to go out and give his all every single time. Sometimes you need to dig deep, maybe depending on your situation, to find that small win. But find those wins and celebrate them. Maybe it's something as simple as wow, I feel like I really gave a great sermon this week. Celebrate that. Maybe someone came to church. You didn't talk to them. They didn't seem that engaged, but they came for the first time in 6 months. Celebrate that. Maybe someone made it through a special song without hitting the wrong note on the piano, or without being completely off key. Celebrate that. Find these small wins and celebrate them with yourself. Give yourself something that you can do, no matter how minor, to uplift the spirit of your congregation and uplift your own spirit. You talked, Robert, about the getting away for a half a day. We did 2 full episodes of our show on prioritizing self-care. And one of the big things that we talked about in that is that spiritual renewal day. My personal opinion is that a half a day isn't enough, that it should be a full day once a month, but that you're taking that time to get away. one of the biggest things that I talk about with the guys that I coach is I say you have to have a hobby. You have to have some sort of escape from the pressure and the monotony of day-to-day life. And so many times when I first have this discussion with a guy, they say, well, that's my family. I come home from work and it's my family. No, it's not your family, because our family, we love our family. We all love our family. We love our spouses. We love our kids, but sometimes that's hard. Sometimes we come home from a hard day of work and there's a list of things that are lined up for us at home. You need to have some sort of hobby that you do that is an escape for everything, that is just for you. For me, I practice martial arts. And so 2 days a week, I'm at a studio training with people. I also coach high school basketball. And I can have, we've already well established, this has been a very difficult week. And yesterday was an incredibly difficult day. And at the end of the day, I was able to get in my car, drive to a gym, and spend 2 hours in the gym with my other coaches and my team and just coaching them. And it was an escape. It was joyful. It brought joy to my life to get something completely mindless away from all of the things that I had surrounding me and just be able to go. I have one guy that I work with that he rides bikes. I had many years where every Friday morning when I was in full-time ministry, church ministry, full-time church ministry, every Friday morning I loaded up the mountain bike and headed down to the trail and went single track mountain biking every Friday morning without fail. It was an escape for me. It was something that I looked forward to. It was something that brought me joy, that I could just get away. Whatever that is, if it's shooting baskets, if it's, going for a hike, like you said, whatever, if it's going fly fishing or going and sitting on a boat or going down a river on a kayak, whatever that, if going to the gym, I know a lot of guys that's going to the gym and getting in a 60-minute, 30-minute workout every day, that is their escape, that is their hobby, that is their personal thing that they have, that gets them some me time, some time to really just focus on yourself, and something that brings you joy, brings you energy, and is an escape for you. I think is critical that we have that in our life. And so if you don't have that, find it.
And it might, and the thing is, it might your family might be included in that. Like for me, my escape is I love playing golf, and we've got this little par 3 course in our community. It literally costs $250 a year, and I can play golf all day, every day. I wouldn't have a job, but I would be decent at a short game at least.
Can you still bring a friend for free?
No,
you can't.
But
do
it's
that
like
anymore?
$5, $5 or $10 for them to play.
Is that the Elks Lodge?
Yeah. And so I love that space, but my boys love golf, and we have a blast, and we laugh, and we have a good time. And is there parenting in that? Yes. Is there still times where we get to have good conversations? Yes. But for me, that fills my cup. Like, I want to talk with my kids. I want to have dialogue. One of my kids is about to kind of head out for the summer as a touring musician with a camp, and he's going to be touring around the country and playing music all summer. I want every second I can get with him between now and the time he leaves. I love spending time with my kids. And so for me, like, I want to go fishing. I want to go play golf, but I don't always want to do that by myself. But like you said, Tony, there are moments where, hey, have that hobby, and it 90% of the time may include your friend group or your family in it. My wife does not want to go play golf. She doesn't even want to go walk around and watch us play golf. That's kind of her time. When we leave, she takes the dog and goes for a walk. She takes a camera and goes and does some photos. Like, she just gets away. But like, we went to UT's basketball game. Somebody gave us tickets, and we went to watch UT play Vandy this past Saturday. And it was just me and my boys. And we had an absolute blast. We were laughing 30 minutes before we left the house, and we laughed for 7 hours as we drove to Knoxville, watched the game, and then drove back home. Stopped at Buc-ee's twice. We had a great time. I mean, it was just, it was a great space. And I told Melissa, I was like, hey, do you want, she's like, honestly, I do not want to go to the game, and this is what I need. I need some time.
I think it's wonderful how one person's joy is another person's nightmare, because
Yeah.
Buc-ee's to me gives me anxiety.
I love Buc-ee's so much. And we didn't even eat at the game because we wanted to eat at Buc-ee's. I mean, it was just like, that was what it was. And so, no.
Well, you were given the tickets, so you could afford to eat at Buc-ee's.
True.
If you were paying for tickets, you couldn't afford to eat at Buc-ee's.
Well, Buc-ee's is cheaper than the game. It was $16 for a souvenir cup and a small Papa John's pizza. I know that because I had to buy one of those. One of my kids needed to eat, but he can't eat anything at Buc-ee's. But yeah. So no, Tony, I love what you're saying there. Like having that hobby, having that space, having that getaway, and two, like I bumped into this guy the other day, and I'm super excited. There may be some other things that come out of these conversations, but a really good friend of mine, his son-in-law, he's trying to make it on the pro fishing circuit. And I was like, yeah, I'm thinking about a fishing license this year. He said, I'm actually a licensed guide. You don't have to have a license to come fish with me. And I was like, man, I haven't been on a boat in a long time. He said, just call me. And I'm like, I'm going to go sit on a boat. I don't have to talk to anybody, but also get to build a relationship with this really cool dude that, I mean, the girl he married, we love that family. And so her dad and I are really, really close, and we just love them, and we love those girls, and we're so thankful that God gave them great husbands and all these things. But I get to go sit on a boat and have conversations about life and fishing and listen to this kid's dreams, and, you know, just pray for that and be a part of that. And those are beautiful things that fill our cups in ways that allow us to kind of experience joy. I can't say thanks enough to the guy, our friend who gave us those tickets. I'm not a UT fan. I know my church is praying for me to not be a Bama fan and be a UT fan, but like I got to go do something with my boys that I could never do if it wasn't for the generosity
that's
of other people, because they were good seats.
Yeah, for me, it's baseball.
So good.
The ones that I mentioned, obviously already coaching basketball and doing martial arts. But for me, it's baseball. The Dodgers have their first spring training game tomorrow, and my calendar is blocked off. I will be watching that. But then it really is an escape and brings me joy, so much so that for Valentine's Day, which you guys don't celebrate, I know, but for Valentine's Day, my wife surprised me and got us season tickets to our local minor league baseball team. And so very excited about that. The Doughboys.
There you go.
Very excited about that. And that's something to look forward to for 3 months this summer. That just is something that honestly, as crazy as it might sound to some people, again, one person's joy is another person's nightmare, brings me great, great joy. And so that's something, we've touched on that enough, that find something that is a hobby that you have, something that you can do that is an escape and that brings you energy and brings you joy. I think something else that is critical to do to maintain that sense of joy is that you need to regularly assess and adjust your life, regularly assess and adjust your strategies, because doing that gives you hope. You know, and that's not something, I know many churches that's an annual thing. I would suggest that if you are perpetually in a state of disappointment, that needs to happen much more regularly, maybe even quarterly, that you're assessing and adjusting your strategies and your plans for your life and your ministry. Because when you come up with a new strategy and a new plan, it inevitably brings some sense of hope for the future.
Do you know one of the things, and this is really, like, this is something I know, but this is really the thing in a situation where my family's like kind of at odds with each other, where I'm facing some real struggles and some things that are really, really hard. In 3.5 hours, the one thing God reminded me of is it's not your job. And what you're talking about there, like 99% of the struggles and tensions and things we face, it's not even in our capabilities to fix. We can't save people. Only God can do that. We can't personally heal marriages. We can sit and listen, and God may use us in a space, but there's so many things that I can't fix the strife and the tension and the worry. And God has given us these things where our responsibility and our role is to sit and to intercede, to pray, and to love God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, our neighbor's self, go and make disciples, to live that. And when we live our lives that way, we find ourselves in a space where, because what typically I'm worried and why I don't find joy is I'm carrying weights that I don't even have the ability to fix. That, that in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, cast your cares on me because I care for you.
Yeah.
And that whole space of like, I'm carrying so many things. I love that Shane and Shane song. I'm fighting a battle you've already won. Like, I'm standing here like fighting these things and worrying about this stuff. And I am so consumed. Like, I was physically ill at a point in time. Like I was during this process over a couple of days that I physically was sick. And like, I'm going, why am I letting myself get torn up over something that even on my best day, I couldn't fix? And so our ability to hand these things over and to say, God, I care greatly about this, but you're the one who overcame the world. And I know you're working through us, but I'm trusting you to handle this. I'm trusting you to deal with this. I know you're the only one who can. And so that's something that, like, in that space and what you're talking about, I just thought, man, we have got to find a way to hold less tightly to things and to hold them loosely so that God can remove the things he needs to remove and place in the things he needs to place.
Yeah, you quoted Henri Nouwen a couple of times in this episode, and he's one of my, we've talked about this before, one of my absolute favorite authors. And he has a quote that I might mess this up a little bit, but it's something it's something like this, that it says, joy doesn't simply happen to us. We have to choose it and keep choosing it every day. We've talked, we're about out of time, and we had so much still to go. We didn't hit any of our special segments today, and I know all of our listeners are incredibly disappointed about that they didn't get to hear us talk about.
Like, what could they have wasted
events.
30 minutes of this episode
what else
on?
We talk about. I want to recap really quick, and then Bruce, go back to you for a minute. That one of the first steps to finding joy in the midst of your trials, finding joy in daily life, is to acknowledge our challenges. We started with that. That it's hard to find joy if you don't acknowledge your challenges. And acknowledging challenges doesn't diminish joy. In fact, I would say that acknowledging our challenges enhances our appreciation for the triumphs that we have in life. And so acknowledge those challenges, celebrate those small wins, find someone who's going to pour into you, find something that brings you energy that is separate from the things that are causing you the stress and the challenges in your life, and choose joy every single day. Make a point to choose it. Make a distinctive point in your life to choose joy every single day. Bruce, you have any closing thoughts for us?
No, I think our discussion today has been helpful to me too, because of my hitting the senior citizen age. I'm not finding joy in many things, and I need to look for that. Honestly, I get more angry at God because my body's changing and I can't do things that I love to do and like to do, so I just ask people to pray for me to find that joy and to find the things we've been talking about. I know when I was younger in ministry, I think it was easier to find the joy for me than it is when I don't have total responsibility of things, and when I can't do things, and I get focused on what I can't do. And so today I've learned one of the things of joy is quit doing that. Don't focus on what I can't do. Try to find some things I can do at my age, and one, I can dress myself, and two, I can feed myself, and maybe those are the simple things in life right now for me. But I find ministry for me has had its times of being frightening because you didn't know what to do. But at the same time, it brought joy because it was excitement and change and seeing what God's going to do because I'm in over my head. So I think that look for those places and those people who can bring you joy, and don't be ashamed to be the only one laughing.
I think that's great. And if nothing else, a small win from this episode of the Small Church Podcast is that Bruce got something out of it. So if none of our listeners got anything out of this episode, Bruce got something
And
out of it.
everyone has to understand what a big deal that is because we don't give him much very often.
We don't at all. And so we are going to celebrate that small win. Hey, we want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Small Church Podcast. We're thrilled that you chose to spend part of your day with us today. We want to remind you that if you are listening to this, why not take a second and subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Your reviews help other people find our show, and that gives us fuel to keep going. We want to also encourage you to drop us a line, share a comment on social media or wherever you listen, and be sure that you tune in next week. If you would like more information on how you can connect with us, reach out to Higher Ministries, higherministries.com, or find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, formerly known as X. This episode of the Small Church Podcast was brought to you by the writings of Henri Nouwen, Dallas Willard, the music of Shane and Shane, and the Johnson City Doughboys. Have a great rest of your week. This is the Small Church Podcast.